interview with Josh Trought at D Acres. Today is May 9th, and Josh has graciously allowed me to interview him for my dissertation. So, first question is, what influenced your decision to become a member of your community?
Well, I mean, first off, I think, Suzanne, I think you're doing really important work, and I'm very happy to participate in it. I think it's important for people to start really looking, investigating into what is the mechanisms of community, what aspects are the positive aspects, what aspects are the negative aspects, so we can improve the structures we have, be it the legal structures or the social systems or whatever impediments are keeping us from really reaching the fruition of community life. So I think it's very valuable what you're doing, documenting all this stuff.
Thank you. One of the things that I'm sort of focusing on, and I focused on in the literature review part of the first 2 chapters you have to do before you do your introduction, your lit review, and then your methodology for how you do your research, and then you defend your proposal, and then you have to do an institutional review board, IRB, and then once you get through all that, then the university decides that they'll let you loose to do your stuff. But one of the things that I was sort of have is like a metaphorical sort of anchor throughout is, of course, you're familiar with Walden's My Life in the Woods by Henry David Thoreau, and then there's Walden 2 by B.F. Skinner, which Twin Oaks and Earth Haven modeled themselves after. So my thing is that, and I have to be really careful about, bias in this, but that I really feel from what I've thus far, what I've done for research, is that permaculture communities are really moving towards what would be sort of metaphorically referred to as Walden 3. A way to live in harmony with the environment, be respectful of people, the use of the land, the importance of maintaining the integrity of the land, and then also, maintaining that level of integrity and connection with each other within that community, and really living in an authentic community. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a deep process.
Yeah. So I know that you were the founder of the community, but for the sake of posterity here, could you just talk about that a little bit, and what led you to, or how D Acres evolved?
Well, yeah, I guess, for me, the whole syndrome of the founder really strikes a nerve or a chord with me. I think all of these terms, there's definitely some prejudice that could be applied to it in a positive or a negative sense. And the founder terminology seems to me, it's a little bit, especially in regards to community, it's a little bit of the chicken or the egg scenario, because really you don't have much of a community if you're just a founder.
Right. You look at yourself separate.
Yeah. So I'm a part of this process, and I was definitely, one of the initial weeds that was transplanted here, and just trying to find my place in the ecology versus having some sort of stature, I think is the idea. Yeah. But in terms of the question is what influenced your decision to become a member of the community. I think
you're a slightly different position than the average person there.
Well, I think everybody's going to come with their own factors, their own circumstance, their own history and experience. And for me, some of it was influenced by family. I have family that lived on this land originally, and still do. So that's a very important part of like why I'm here.
Where did you get the idea to, like when, back in 1997, when you were building this building, right? Because this one started around then?
98, fall of 98.
Yeah, in certain phases it went up.
Mm-hmm.
And it's still going up in phases. Yeah. So you obviously made the conscious decision to have it be built using sustainable forms of energy for support. And, when you look back on it, it's like, did you have any idea that from then, which is now close to, right now we're talking 17 years ago, that, it would sort of evolve into what the organization has today?
I'm not sure, I definitely didn't have a vision of how it would evolve entirely. I think there's a lot of basis for this project. There's historical basis, different models that have been implemented in the past, sort of what you're getting to, a collision of the back to the land philosophy and the earth care philosophy, the environmental movement and the agricultural movement coming together with a community element. The Nearing's book, the Good Life. I remember my dad gave me that right after I graduated from college, and it was very influential in getting us started. Sort of that back to the land philosophy. I think that's really what led my aunt and uncle to come up here to begin with in the 1940s, to retreat from the urban environment and to seek the solace of the woods. But taking it a step further is really this community approach where we're focusing on a vibrant socioeconomic system on site, with people being involved with different micro-enterprises and collaboratively organizing to meet our needs, but also have this element where we invite people from the region to participate at various levels, sort of open format club or social organization that allows people a place that's not really restrictive of fees or status, and allows people to come together and form a new style of agricultural community that's not like a commune, and allows people to have their own lives but participate in a group effort and a collaborative mechanism, organizing and connected.
And then there's that educational aspect where, those of you here, you live by doing, and set an example, and it would seem logical to me that, that people come here and they say, oh, this can actually work, and some of this does show up in their lives outside of the acres.
Oh, absolutely. You see people starting to implement composting toilets or solar showers, building on their greenhouses and their season extension to amplify their food production. There's lots of residual and sort of information that's passing around like, it is almost flow of information.
It's like a mimetic thing. Yeah. Now, see, that would make a really good study. Maybe I get done my dissertation. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
Study that to see, like, what has influenced that. I know that, like, coming here, how I bring my kids, that's had a real big impact on my son David's exposure, even just hearing about me talking about it, and then his sisters, and he's only been here, I think, a couple of times, but he's an environmental design major, and of course Scarlett's still trying to figure out how she can do something like this and support herself and pay off her massive student loans, and then Genevieve doesn't want to go to college right away after, school, or unless you can find a college that has permaculture, something as a major, so it's all that, yeah. So I think it's really cool. And, and you figure that's just my family, how that must ripple out into other community members. So, and I know that one of the things I appreciated the last time that we interviewed, when I was talking to you about the sort of burden and expectations put on you as, being the leader and the director and everything, is that you were what I thought was a really profound statement. She said, "We're so busy living it and just doing the work that I don't have time to think about this stuff." And so it's like, I think that's sort of like the ripple effect. It's there, but you're just busy, living the example and hoping that it ripples out. So it is hard to think about it, but you've done good work. So that's cool. So yours was, and then also one of the things that also come through with you is the absolute passion, love of the land, and the preservation of this property, and not just this property, but the larger community around it. To me, it's had a big, seems to me it's a big influence.
Yeah, I think I would like to be doing service work, if it wasn't located in a certain place, or this place, I think wherever I was, I would like to be doing some sort of service work.
What do you mean by that?
Work that was, positive for the community as well as the environment. And, just like you're saying, trying to have respect for this biome, or, the planet, without really, I think we're really caught up in North America in the ownership paradigm, and really feel like, well, I can't really invest in a project or in a piece of land unless I own it.
Right.
And I think it's very counterproductive to our overall biome to really have that established relationship in which we don't feel like we can invest unless we own, because we really don't own much of anything.
Well, that's the thing that's always been a little hitch at Finhorn, is that at least within the eco-village, that the new housing units that are built, whether they're like a private home or they're like co-housing units, or whatever is involved in there, because they do a lot of things, is that people buy like the abode, so to speak, but that the property belongs to the community. So that's, so it's like and that protects the community from like, subdivision, because it can't be somebody can't have a hissy fit and say, okay, I'm splitting off and getting some, going to the planning board and splitting off. It's like that. I don't know how exactly they do it legally, but they must have to sign that you can buy this house, you can buy this, like, what we would refer to here as a condo unit, but that, you don't own the property under it, even if you have like an independent house. So that's sort of interesting. I know I heard something in China. I mean, not in China, but I mean, I was listening to the radio, NPR one day, and I was driving around, and it was, what struck me about it is it was talking about, like the looming threat, of the West with China and all that. But one of the pieces I found really interesting is that more and more Chinese are coming to buy property in the States because they can't buy property. That it's that whole thing where it's like it belongs to the village or belongs to the government or whatever, and they can build on it. But they are looking more to the model to the West, and I was thinking, I don't know. It's got some, there's advantages and disadvantages to both sides. So I see what you're talking about there. And I think that's something that Finhorn, even as they've expanded, that they've struggled with. But that's, well, when you accumulate all that and you want to run an organization, it's like the same thing here. You get to the point where you start developing some housing units, it's got to be the, you know, how you work out that finances. I'm sort of getting to the point when I go back to La Cité in Colbert, they obviously have like the same kind of arrangement, and I don't know how exactly that they do it. You know, it's when they bought that property, they put in for subdivision of certain units, but then I don't know how they guard against losing their like geographic coherency. So I'll try to find out and let you know how they've done it, because it seems like they have a lot figured out from, you know, because they've been doing it for so long and whatever. Thanks. Well, thanks for that. 3%.
Yeah, no, I think there's lots of decisions to be made as organizations move forward in terms of equity in the ownership, per se, or the decision making, which seems like the more valuable of the decision making is more valuable than, you know, just your name on a piece of paper, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, everybody can make decisions about what happens to that land, or the use of the land together. And I think, and they do a lot of that. They, so yeah, it's interesting that I haven't really got into it very much, but I can tell. Like after I left, they were having some meeting to decide about, I think, something else that they want to build. And but I'll find out, because I'm going to go back and spend 4 days there. This next time.
Great.
Yeah. So anyway, how long have you been a member, or how long have you been at the Acres?
Since 1997.
97. Right. And you used to come up before that and visit your art market?
Oh yeah, no, I've been coming up in my whole life as far as relationship to the land in New Hampshire. It's pretty strong.
So would you find that no matter, because you traveled quite a bit, didn't you, after you graduated from college?
Sure, a little bit here and there. Lots to South America. So, but yeah, I like it here.
Yeah. Did you find just sort of in your general sort of like wherever you travel around that, you know, here would come back into your sort of psychic framework of?
Well, I think ultimately, you know, people advise me at some level to go home. You know, it's a big choice to become like an expat, or to really relocate beyond what you're familiar with and what you can relate to. I think to a certain degree, it's a big choice to move beyond your culture to a degree.
Because where were you in South America?
We spent some time in Argentina, primarily, but several countries. And yeah, I definitely looked at people who were expats and who traveled down there extensively for long periods of time. And you know, my motivation to go down there at some point was to, you know, naively or egotistically, I assumed I could help the situation down there. But I think we need more help up here. And I think the people down there were really quick to point that out, that if I was looking to do a service, then this is the place to do service. North America and Europe, Australia are places where we're being counterproductive in our tenure here on the planet.
Oh, we are. Have you ever read Jared Diamond?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I used to sort of put a blank and think, as much as I read this book from
The Guns, Germs, and Steel, or the...
Yeah, it's the other one. The one about...
Collapse?
Yes, Collapse, yeah. And, it's, he's much more optimistic about, things than some other people that sort of have that. But it's the idea if we can make the change before it's too late, we can save ourselves and provide a quality of life. But I think that's really interesting how that he's coming at it from a straight academic perspective, really. And then you look at like David Holbrook and his work, and Bill Mollison when he was alive, and they that permaculture came out of academia, but yet the sort of way it's evolved over the years. But really, it's all just so synergistic. It's all just so interrelated. They're both saying the same thing, just from slightly, like off from one side from each other. So I think that's really fascinating. And yet, how many people don't even think about that? Don't put that together. It's disturbing. So I know what you mean. Now, do you have other members of your family living with you as well here?
My parents live up the road. They have their own residency, but they would come to a lot of events and participate pretty actively with this community. I guess they're one of the principal people we consider that extended. People that not necessarily living on site and focusing on the organizational activities on a day-to-day basis, but are a big part of what we do and a big reason why we do what we do.
Yeah, they're very supportive. Yeah. What do you think is different about your life in this community in comparison to if you lived in more of a mainstream type of lifestyle or a mainstream community?
Well, we divide a lot of tasks here. So, I don't necessarily have to go grocery shopping on a regular basis. I don't have to clean the whole house. I just have to clean my portion of it, which is really great. We're able to accomplish a lot more, I think, with our combined efforts than, if you're sort of doing your individual thing, all the time spent in either cleaning your own house or cooking your own food, instead of sharing that as tasks, you have more time to spend ultimately, and you can accomplish more, and it's very, very rewarding in that sense. And obviously you're never bored, or there's always something to do, or ways you can contribute. But I think sometimes when you're isolated, it becomes harder to sort of approach that as the way of life.
Right, good thing, and it's true, and that's one of the things that I've seen, from being a Fifth Horn and then looking at things at La Cité is, it's the same thing when you have your community events, so say you have 60 people here, but yet with everybody helping, everything is, gets produced and then cleaned up, and, so it's not like everybody has to spend the next day, cleaning up from this big event, where say if you did that in a private home, you'd be pretty much spending the next couple of days, sorting everything out, and yeah, it's interesting. I think that's probably how people used to have a lot of kids, big families at work, everybody do that. But it is that idea that you're not, there's all these people that can help instead of just, you have to do everything, which is such a burden. I think that's what makes people feel so alienated and depressed. One of the things was that I included in my little review was how Americans may be one of the more financially better off societies, but yet we're also one of the most stressed societies. And one of the reasons is because people feel they just have to do everything, that they have to provide everything for their whole little family unit, and it's really hard to do that. So, yeah, as much as we say it takes a village to raise a child, how many of us can really do that? We see aspects of it, but yet not I think, the way that maybe other cultures, look at it, where everybody's responsible, for the kids. So it is. Do you feel that you live a fulfilling life in the community? And if so, why? And then how would you sort of define a fulfilling life? Could you answer that question?
Yeah, so for me, fulfilling is having some objectives and working towards them. So I think it's really important as an organization, we're constantly reflecting on, are we, what is our mission? Are we fulfilling our mission? How? What are the ways that we're getting there? So it's a systematic approach to me, which really sort of works well for my mind. Sort of the steps to accomplish. And so to fulfill my life purpose, I would just like to try to give as much as I can, as opposed to, I have definitely been blessed with all kinds of gifts throughout my life, in terms of my ability to travel, the circumstances in which I was raised. I was never hungry or in need. So I'm trying to find ways in which I can provide back to grow food sustainably, and to provide models for sustainable living, so that we can continue living this life with such a joy. So it's be a wonderful thing to share for the many generations to come, instead of sort of really being greedy at this juncture, I feel like, with how we're abusing the planet. So trying to find ways to stop that cycle.
And that gives you a sense of fulfillment, really, towards that.
Yeah. Everybody's got goals. Mine's to sort of walk lightly and try to build the knowledge, the collective knowledge, rebuild some wisdom, and how to take care of each other in this place.
And so what are your more immediate goals, like right here?
Like today?
Yeah.
Today,
maybe the next 6 months.
Today I put, I have to do chores around the house. It's Friday, and then I'll be more or less taking loose ends from the week. A little clean up here, maybe some transplanting and stuff. But the next 6 months, we're just adapting to the constant evolution of this place. Regina's leaving in the fall.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm thinking about, is what the next stages are. And I think it revolves a lot around what people will be involved. I think that's the heart of the crux of the issue. So we're trying to figure out what kind of formula we would like to move forward with in terms of the people power. So, thinking about that a good bit.
Yeah. Now, how do you feel you coordinate your personal needs and goals in life with the goals and purpose of the larger community?
Yeah, I'm not particularly, I don't really structure my life so there's a lot of distinction there. I don't really and some people would judge that as a questionable life philosophy. But for me, I try to synchronize my daily work and my daily life with my overall fulfillment. So I feel like I do in lots of ways get lots of fulfillment from the activities that are my daily life. And I think that's what's feeding me, as opposed to, I think there's many people that have careers so they can provide the revenue for them to seek fulfillment in other ways. So I'm just trying to synchronize, the daily life with what feeds me and what nourishes and provides me inner happiness, and that's been a goal of mine for most of my adult life. And I think it's working out pretty well. I feel pretty comfortable with the work I do, and satisfied with the life choices, for sure.
So you feel a real integration, not just a synthesis between the community and your own goals.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, it is. It's very fulfilling. I don't know that sometimes if I lost that sense of purpose, I think this would not be rewarding work. But in going through the life, I'm not sure I see where you would develop a sense of purpose that made so much sense in terms of logic. Sort of the sense of purpose that I think is often the mainstream paradigm in which you're garnering wealth or resources for either yourself or your immediate family is just not logical in some sense. It's just going to satisfy a very short-term goal.
Right.
And I think we as a species just need to transcend that. We have the intellectual capacity to go beyond the lizard brain or whatnot for immediate satisfaction and start looking at the big picture.
It's that whole trap of consumerism. Yeah, you need this to be happy, so you have to make more money to get this, and then you're miserable when you get to a certain point because you just feel like you're on a trap to make more money to keep up with all this stuff, and it's a vicious trap.
Yeah, and when we describe it in such ways, it seems so simplistic, and it's so I don't know, a little discouraging that so much of our culture has followed that path. But I think by the same token, if we call it out, if we identify it for what it is, and we make people aware of this mirage, this illusion, then we can move forward from there. And so that's sort of what you're getting at, sort of living through this example and discovering, the happiness and fulfillment that results is where I think we're really providing evidence that it's possible and that it actually is an alternative, a viable alternative.
That I admire about yours and Regina's lifestyle here is it seems to be significantly uncluttered as compared to most people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not that you don't have your stresses and trials and tribulations, but it's like just because
it's pretty simple in lots of ways.
Yeah.
It's nice. It's definitely. I don't envy the chaos of other people's lives.
I mean, just think of my life. I have to get up in the morning, go commute, Concord. I'll edit this out. It totally sucks, But I hope that I can sort of start moving away from that at some point. So anyway, I'll leave that out of my transcription. Now, what elements of permaculture design do you practice in your everyday life? It's a sort of funny question asking you that. You should talk about your teaching too.
Well, as far as the design, I think it is what you're getting at. It's about trying to set up a way of life that is comfortable and rewarding and provides that's what nourishes us. And so when we look at that life, for me, it no longer really is necessary for me to travel. What's necessary for me is to be on site and to be a part of this ecology. Whereas I can have a sense of the seasons to a high degree and have a sense of what resources are here that we can use through time, through generations. How to use the soil, how to use the water, the air, the biomass, the species diversity. I guess I'm just trying to immerse myself fully in this ecology, which I think is a large degree the ultimate goal of permaculture is for humanity to realize its place in the vibrant ecology. And so this is a great test site for that philosophy and actualization, implementing, just on a day-to-day basis, all these different theories to try to build the ecology.
And you've, how many years have you been teaching permaculture design?
Various, you start out as a sort of a teacher's assistant at various courses and so forth. So, probably 10, 15 years ago, started doing that. And then there was a course that started getting offered here about 5 years ago. And this is the third year that I'm co-teaching that class. So probably not that long, really, in terms of teaching of the official classes, like the 72-hour course. But, offering workshops and hands-on type practical information for many years.
Plus you teach it at PSU off and on, or you make appearances or presentations?
Yeah, little presentations, stuff like that, It's introductory stuff.
Yeah, makes an impression, I'm sure.
Sure, that's right.
Now, what else would you like to share about your community?
Jeez. Well, I think it's important for everybody getting into this to realize that, heaven is in heaven, and, on earth we have all the weaknesses of our character are exposed to a high degree in community, which, it allows you to work on those weaknesses. It provides you a real fishbowl to discover yourself and reflect upon yourself. Character development, I think, is something that is a strong component of community. And I think it's important for people to approach community with that in mind, that it is hard work. It is not something that comes easily. Perhaps it does for some, but I think by and large, we've developed this cultural paradigm, the current contemporary society has developed in some sense because it is easier. It is more simple to have that box and to have that simplicity of a structure that's well known and accepted versus forging ahead with a structure that's less well known, that obviously has a lot of benefits, but has challenges that are, well, at times you can't anticipate. They're not the normal course. So new and unforeseen challenges, I think, are often frightening. People have chosen to follow this sort of structure, go to school, graduate from school, get the job, get the mortgage, retire, die. That sort of have kids somewhere in there as well.
Right.
But so when we diverge from that, so when we talk about investing our lives in a service or mutually supportive organization, it throws a lot of doubt and a lot of confusion. What's the right step to take? It requires a higher level of confidence and trust, and that takes time to build. That takes time to nurture as well. And I think just people need to be prepared for that when they're when they're in, when they're on the outside looking in, thinking about that transition, it's just, there's a lot to it in terms of psychologically what we're prepared to offer and give, and reflectively in terms of like how we have to, when you change your lifestyle, you also have to change your approach and your character and how you want to interact, because it's we're creating a new paradigm, but we're going to have to change as well. And so I think it's something to consider.
The psychological and emotional challenges.
I think there's a lot to that. I think that the physical work and stuff is very difficult as well. The work that has to be done to grow food, to build structures, to heat and clothe ourselves. There's a lot to that. But there's also a lot towards the psychological. Why are you inspired to give to a group versus people's their preconceived, their notion right now that it's the self, the pursuit of the self is the most important. I think we've been sort of trained to believe that. And so letting that go is difficult.
Yeah. Well, you figure how deeply embedded that is, particularly in American culture.
Yeah. From day one.
Yeah,
That's how we treat babies.
Yeah, it's like, your independent action, independent recognition, and then like a sense of, and for people, like when I used to run the homeless shelter, I'd see this sense of shame in people that, had failed at like being able to meet that, like, that cultural expectation. They live independently, you sort of provide for yourself independently, and then the effects that had on their sense of self-worth too. So and I think that's also going to be one of the biggest challenges for people making that shift, because unless you come to grips with that, it's like, that's like a bridge that you can't go over until you like really examine, like, wow, like I have to let some of this go. It's interesting. In the cities where you said it really, resonates, I'll talk to you more about that when I see them again, because this was like a Bataan Death March of getting to know them like on a weekend basis, and they had this, have it at the school, and then they have it in the community room. This, it's like a poster, and it has their principles of the community, and then they have these 22 sub-principles that all fit into the larger ones that they live by. And one of the ones that, when the Maya, the director, was talking to me about it, she sort of paused on this one that they call learning. I think, what did she phrase it? Something like learning about your two natures. And then so she asked me, if I knew what she meant by that, and I said, well, I could make suppositions, but explain to me, please. So she says, it's the idea that we have different aspects of our self, personalities, psychological framework, and so that you need to constantly be working on within the context of community as well as your personal development of, she simplified version of, what's your good side and what are the things that you constantly need to work on, so that sort of fits in with that. I thought it was significant that all the 22 that she sort of stopped on that and wanted to explain that to me a little more, so I think that what she was trying to talk about was really exactly the same thing. It's just, a sort of, slightly different context, and that, it's something that, everybody has to really be aware of to feel that sense of fulfillment, within the community. And as you know, where you've had, I think one of the first times I talked to you, you'd had somebody that lived here for several years decide to leave, and it just seems as though that's, part of that is, that when you have discontent, it's that balance between your sense of fulfillment as yourself and then seeing how you individually fit into the community as a whole, and then how you can, need to let go of sense of yourself. It's almost like, like I was brought up Catholic, and I spent a lot of time in the convent, strangely enough, when I was growing up. And and it's funny because I had never really thought about it until like here I am, gosh, what, like 50 years later, that the sisters would talk about that. They would talk about it sort of like in a religious basis, and they would have a lot of prayer. But when you look at it, like sort of more objectively, you separate all the different cultural aspects of, what culture this is operating in. The fact it's the same thing, that they would pray that, that God would give them the strength to live more harmoniously. So they were looking at it from that religious under thing, but then it's also the idea of like, looking at it more sort of secular, where your viewpoint is just, whoever you want to pray to, or your sense of self, like, oh, I need to think about that, I need to have more awareness, So I think that's really fascinating, and it is, a significant part of that group process, And that's something that Pinhorn does, is that you think you're in these programs and you're all having a rip-roaring time or whatever, but they do this right from practically the minute you get in there. It's this whole thing about group process, because that's really what the cohesion of the community is that group process. So it's being aware of your own sense of self and interaction within that group process, and realizing that you need to let go of a total isolated sense of yourself to make that group process work. So, yeah. But they don't really tell you that. They're very subtle about it, and because they want you to come back and spend more money. So anyway, but anyway, that is very cool. So, but it keeps things challenging and interesting.
Yeah, I'm not sure that challenge will ever cease.
No. Well, thank you. Those are all my official questions.
Okay.